Today, we're pulling back the curtain on some serious drama happening at the Federal Reserve. Inside America's central bank. A major disagreement is brewing, and it has huge implications for the entire economy. And this isn't just happening behind closed doors. It's about to go very, very public.
So at the heart of all this is one big question. What on earth should they do about interest rates? The Fed's upcoming July meeting. It's not just another policy decision. No, this one is shaping up to be a real showdown. We're talking about top officials getting ready to publicly break ranks in a way we just haven't seen in decades. So what is going on? What's driving this internal rebellion?
You have to understand, this isn't just a simple disagreement over a number. The Federal Reserve is basically a house divided against itself. It's split into two camps, and they have completely different reads on where the U.S. economy is headed.
Okay, so on one side of the ring, you've got Team Cut Now. These are the so-called doves. They're looking around, they're seeing clear signs that the economy is slowing down, and they think it's time to cut interest rates to give it a boost. But on the other side, you have Team Wait and See, the hawks. They are still really worried that inflation could pop back up, and they're arguing, hey, the best move right now is to do nothing and just wait for more data.
All right, let's start with the doves, with Team Cut Now. For them, the biggest danger we're facing isn't inflation anymore. No, it's the risk of a real economic slowdown. The doves' argument is pretty straightforward. The writing is on the wall. They see economic growth clearly downshifting, and they're pointing to a labor market that's already near what Governor Waller calls stall speed. And as for inflation from tariffs, they argue it's just a temporary shock, a one-time blip that the Fed can and should look past, because the real underlying inflation fight is already won.
And Governor Waller has been the most public voice for this point of view. His argument is that any inflationary hit from tariffs will be pretty limited because he believes foreign suppliers and importers are going to eat most of that cost. So in his mind, it's just not a big enough threat to stop the Fed from cutting rates to help out the broader economy.
And look, this isn't just a feeling they have. It's backed up by hard data. Wall Street economists are one by one lowering their forecasts for GDP growth. And as Goldman Sachs points out, this slowdown is happening before the full drag from the trade war has even peaked. For the doves, this chart is a big flashing red light telling the Fed, you gotta act now. But of course, that is only one side of the argument. The hawks over in the wait and see camp, well, they look at the exact same data and come to a completely different conclusion.
The hawks are basically saying it's way too early to declare victory on inflation. They argue that with inflation still somewhat elevated and a solid labor market, the Fed is actually well-positioned to just wait. They're convinced the full inflationary impact of these tariffs hasn't even hit us yet, so the only smart move is to be patient and see what the next round of data shows.
New York Fed President John Williams, who is a really key voice in the Fed's leadership, he pretty much crystallizes this whole concern. He estimates that tariffs could push inflation up by a full percentage point. And because of that risk, he believes holding rates steady gives the Fed valuable time to see how this all plays out. It's a classic risk management argument, right? Better to wait and be sure than to cut too soon and live to regret it.
And you can see their worry quantified right here. Forecasts from Goldman Sachs show that while, underlying inflation might be cooling, these tariffs are expected to push core inflation significantly higher. We're talking potentially above 3%. So for the hawks, cutting rates right before that happens would be a huge unforced error. Now, this deep disagreement isn't just talk. It is widely expected to lead to a formal, very public act of defiance at the next meeting.
So what does this rebellion actually look like? Well, it comes down to a single number, 2. Two Fed governors, Christopher Waller and Michelle Bowman, are expected to publicly dissent from the group and vote to cut rates immediately. An act of defiance this visible from Fed governors is, well, it's incredibly rare.
And to understand just how rare this is, you really have to look at the history. A single governor dissenting is uncommon enough. The last time that happened before this recent period was way back in 2005. But two governors dissenting at the same time? According to Deutsche Bank, you have to go all the way back to 1993 for that. This would be a historic signal of a deeply, deeply divided Fed.
But is it really just about economics? Here's where it gets really spicy. Analysts over at JP Morgan have floated a pretty provocative idea that a double dissent might be less about the data and more about politics. They've suggested it could be seen as an audition for the next Fed chair appointment.
That just adds a whole other layer of intrigue to this drama, doesn't it?
So, with the Fed so publicly split, and with so much on the line, what does all this mean for the future of the economy, for you and me?
This right here is the multi-trillion-dollar question. This internal division at the Fed has created just profound uncertainty, not just for the markets, but really for anyone with a loan or a savings account. I mean, just look at these forecasts from the world's top banks. They are all over the place. Citi is expecting aggressive cuts starting in September. Goldman and HSBC see a couple of cuts this year. But then you have Deutsche Bank, they don't see one until December. And Morgan Stanley, they're forecasting 0 cuts this year. The experts are just as divided as the Fed itself.
So what's the big takeaway here? It's that the split you see inside the Fed perfectly mirrors the confusion across the entire financial world. Nobody seems to agree on what the biggest threat actually is, a slowing economy or another painful wave of inflation.
And that leaves us with the ultimate question for the Federal Reserve, the one they have to answer. Is their biggest risk right now continuing to fight yesterday's inflation battle, or is it failing to act in time to prevent tomorrow's economic slowdown? Whatever they decide, their decision is going to affect us all.